Welcome back to Barn Built Fabrications, and today we're going to try to address the hard start situation we're having on our 2011 Cat 259 B3. So the problem that we're having on this Cat is that we're having to turn the key and just crank and crank and crank and crank, and sometimes it won't start at all, other times it will. If I go ahead and I put a jump pack on the battery, sometimes that helps it spin fast enough to get it going, which to me is indicative of a glow plug issue. And so I jumped in there and I went through some of the wiring already, and I'll get you guys in, show you my diagnostic process and what I think it is. So I'm up inside the machine now, and I want you to look. This is the glow plug light, and then we'll see the other stuff on the dash here. And if you look, whenever I turn the key, this light will flash for a brief second. And we get nothing. But since this light is flashing for a brief second, it leads me to believe that the wiring is okay on the that glow plug circuit, but I'm gonna jump in the back underneath the hood and kind of show you what's going on back there. Inside the engine bay here, if you look, your glow plugs are going to be these guys right here. So you have 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, and 1 in the back. And then what you have is this little bus bar that has this rubber insulation on it to keep anything from arcing. And in the very back, there's a wire connection, and that's the 12-volt power that comes in on that last stud of the glow plug, and then that feeds the power. If I get my light to sit up right, that will feed the power through this bus bar, which then powers up all the glow plugs in the circuit. So I was going through the schematics of this machine, and on this side of the wall, this is the driver's side, the left side, there are 2 relays, and I have the one undone right here, this guy. It will be to the right here mounted on the wall, and that is the cold start relay, which handles turning on the glow plugs. And what I did with my diagnostic was, the first thing I did was I undid that wire that's in the back, the connection I showed you on the back of that rail. And then after I got that disconnected, what I went ahead and did was I took a jumper cable and went straight from my battery positive over to one of the ends of the glow plugs, which you're gonna have this little plastic piece that just comes right off. It's easiest for me to like unscrew it, although it's not actually threaded. That helps it come off easier. And then I just ran the jumper cable to there, held it on it for a few seconds, and then tried to fire up the machine, and it fired right up, no problem. So that told me that glow plugs are likely the issue, or something with that circuitry, or something going on with that part of the machine. So then I went and I started tracing everything back. I followed that wire, did a continuity test, and that all checked out. And I went over to that cold start relay, swapped it out for a spare that I had. That didn't make any change. So then I took my meter, and I was getting my 12 volts on the high voltage side, but I was not getting anything on the control side. So I went and I made this little jumper and essentially did the same test where I put this in the bleed connector on this side of the circuit, and then I ran this over to the other side that had constant 12 volt. I believe that is, this side was the 30, number 30 on the relay, and then this side was 85, if I'm not mistaken. And again, did that for a couple seconds and then fired up the machine, no problem. So then the question then became, what's causing the issue where the control side of that circuit is not coming on? And I did a whole bunch of looking into stuff. There's another relay that's in the actual cab behind the seat. And I swapped that relay out. It made no change, wasn't getting any power on that circuit. and I tried to see if there was a fuse or a circuit breaker or something, and I didn't find anything in the schematics or in my looking. So I went ahead and I checked the glow plugs. I went to ohm them out to see what the resistance is on there, thinking that possibly what the issue was that I was having an issue with one of my glow plugs, which was then throwing the computer into a safety where it was shutting off the circuit for the glow plugs, reading that there was a faulty reading on there. So let me show you what I found. So there's a nut on the end of each one of these glow plugs, and you loosen those up, and this rail, I'm calling it a bus bar. It's literally just a piece of metal that goes across, probably aluminum, that has this insulation on it so it doesn't short or arc to anything. And then this will slide out. And then I was going around testing these and loosening the nut. And what you want to do in order to test these is you'll take your meter, do a continuity test for ohms, and you'll go from the end of this stud to ground. You can do it to the engine block. It should be grounded, but if it has paint or grease or anything on it, you might have a little bit of a hard time getting a good ground. So I ended up going straight to the negative side of the battery because it was close enough, and that just gave me a more consistent reading on it. And I'll show you what I got here for my first one. My first glow plug here, I'm getting right under 1 ohm on that. On my third glow plug, I'm getting 1.1, and on the fourth, I'm getting 1 ohm on that as well. So those are all pretty consistent. And yes, I realized I went from 1 to 3, and I'll show you why. So I went over here and I was trying to get a reading off of my number 2, and it is dancing all over the place. At one point in time, I had like 300 ohms or something. And so I was like, all right, well, that seems odd. So I went ahead to, let me get closer, loosen this nut on this glow plug here to see if maybe I was just having a bad connection. And the whole thing just spun out. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that if this isn't the problem, it is certainly a problem. So yeah, this is not supposed to come out. It's supposed to stay in there and come out as one piece. The outer sleeve is still in there, as you guys saw whenever this came out. So this definitely needs to be replaced. Luckily, I've got a new one in my pocket. So you can see the difference between the old and the new. And that sucker looks beat on the bottom. So yeah, this not supposed to screw out. That is one solid piece. Supposed to be anyways. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and pull that old sleeve out, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get this dropped in, get everything tightened back down. We'll see if this fixes our issue. Fingers crossed. New glow plug is in, so let's go ahead and fire it up, or try to fire it up and see if it does. Well, no cigar, so we'll keep digging. All right, guys, so I spent the weekend working on this old thing, and I think I got it figured out. I'll show you what that is, but first I want to run you guys through this whole system in case you need to do the diagnostic process yourself, as I know there's not a whole bunch online, at least not anything that I was able to really find in regards to the system and finding stuff. So I want to run you guys through real quick, real short, what the whole system for this glow plug and starting circuitry and stuff is. But I do want to give a big thanks to the guys over at Ring Power Cat. They were a big help. The one guy there, Jake, he was helping me walk through these different things and find them and test them out. And I think we ended up finding the problem. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead, walk you guys around and just show you the different points of the circuitry and things to check. So jump back over here into the cab. These B3 models are different. There's a few different ways that these glow plug circuits are operated. The older B models, I guess, had an actual physical button or toggle switch that you use to turn on the glow plugs, which honestly I probably would have preferred. It's more foolproof instead of kind of what this is. This computer, or this glow plug circuit is on a time delay computer circuit. And that way you just turn the key, and then that's whenever you probably hear the fuel pump and everything priming, that at the same time should turn on the glow plugs. So there's nothing really to check here. As long as you're getting your power to your key, you should be good. The next thing you want to check is going to be behind the seat here. So you're gonna have these two fuse boxes. If I get this thing out. Anyways, you have two fuse boxes. Obviously this is the cover for this one. And down here on the bottom one, this is going to be the relay for your glow plugs. This is going to be the next thing in line after 12 volt power on your key switch. So test your relay, make sure you're getting power here and you're getting 12 volts to this whole fuse box. It is not uncommon to get moisture in the back of these and have corrosion, which you don't want that. You're pretty much just screwed because you need to get a whole new harness at that point, unless you're pretty crafty and you take it apart and clean it and put it all back together yourself. The next thing I want to show you guys is with this cab flipped up. So we're now underneath it. And back here, what you're going to have is you have relays, big relays here. That's going to be your main power coming in off the battery and key. So make sure you're getting 12 volts on the output side of that relay. If that checks, the next thing you want to do is run over to here, and where you have these 4 plugs, there's 2 for each one of those fuse boxes. This lower one here is the one we were checking out. Make sure you have your 12 volts to both of those. That's actually going to be upstream from that relay. If you do have 12 volts there, you're good to go. If not, or rather if you have 12 volts applied to the studs but nothing inside the panel, sorry, but you might be in trouble with that harness. But if you do have your power here on this guy and you have power on the inside for your relay, the next thing we want to check is going to be back in the engine compartment. So now that we're back over here under the, I guess this is not really under the hood, but whatever you want to call this, the next thing we want to check is going to be this solenoid here with the green cap. And that is on top of your fuel pump. And that what that does is it is a fuel enriching solenoid for your cold start. It adds a little bit extra fuel to help you start. And if you have power to that small relay that I just showed you in that fuse box behind the seat, it should be coming to here, and this guy should be clicking whenever you go ahead and put power to it. One thing I used to check that was I turned the key on and just let it sit, and I took the small relay and I pulled it in and out, and I listened for this clicking and made sure that it was actuating properly. So that checked out as well on this machine. Now, if you do have power to here and that's working correctly and all your circuitry upstream is working properly, such as in my case, the next thing is actually kind of back to where we were, where we're getting power for our high voltage side coming off that cold start relay over here on this wall, but nothing on the control side. All right, so then the next thing at this point, if you're in the same spot that I am, is okay, so what's going on? Why is that circuit not getting kicked on or being commanded on, right? So what you have is you need to have an input signal that goes to the computer that says, okay, we've met these parameters, go ahead and put the output or send the output signal to that cold start relay to turn on the glow plugs. So then the question then becomes, well, what are the inputs and why are we not getting them? And on this B3 machine, you're going to have 2 things that determine that. You're going to have a hydraulic oil temperature sensor and you're going to have your coolant temperature sensor. Now, in this case, and likely yours if you're in the same spot that I am, it's going to be that hydraulic temperature sensor, hydraulic oil temperature sensor. And the reason being is oftentimes they get oil in the sensor and that will cause it to fail. So let me bring you to where that's at. So the hydraulic oil temperature sensor is going to be back here underneath the cab. And this is going to be your hydraulic oil tank. And that sensor is located right here on the bottom right if you're looking at the tank. And so one way to test if this is your issue is that is going to work very similar to any kind of other temperature sensor, where if you jump the pins, it's going to essentially tell the computer that it's red hot. And like if you had a coolant temperature sensor, it would pin it. Now, if you unplug it, it should go ahead and do the opposite of that, saying that it's really cold, which I was able to use to replicate this issue a few times and test it. So I'll go ahead and show you guys that that's pretty much our fix. So this is just going to be for test purposes only. You do need to replace this sensor, but we'll go ahead and unplug it. Take that out, just leave it sitting. And now we're gonna jump back up here in the cab and see if that fixes our issue. Go ahead, turn the key on, wait for that time delay to go through, and we'll start it up. All right, so that pretty much proves our point here. With unplugging that, it gets it to fire back up. One thing to note, your hydraulic oil temperature light will flash, you'll get an alarm so long as that sensor is unplugged. Unfortunately though, unplugging that will only work for maybe 1 or 2 starts, and then you'll have the opposite thing happen where the computer senses that there's a fault with that plug being unplugged, and then the machine will then not start up, or you'll have the same hard start issue rather, because you're not going to get the output signal to turn on the glow plugs, which is the same problem we're having. So that sensor is going to need to be replaced, but for testing purposes, you can go ahead and try that, see if it works. If it does, that answers. If not, go ahead and move on to check that cooling temp sensor. Hopefully my quick little run through there was clear and easy to follow and not just all over the place. I think it was important to show you the whole kind of system, so that way if you're not having exactly the same problem but a similar problem that I'm having, or rather the same problem but a different cause, you're able to troubleshoot the system by kind of going through those different parts and things to test. Hopefully this video helped you out, and if it did, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And you guys get outside, get wrenching on something, piss off your neighbors, disappoint your mom, and until next time, keep on keeping on.